What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Ryan Moody, Jimmy, the well-traveled Jimmy Smith, let me say. And Jimmy, I let us down. I knew it. I knew as soon as I said, refresh Jimmy's page. We'll be back as soon as the card's over. I said, you know what? I know I just did this to us. Jimmy, I'm sure for the countless that were sitting there refreshing it, like, where, some of them maybe who stayed awake until Monday, were like, where is this recap? Jimmy got stuck in the middle. You know what? I thought of you in a scene from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles where John Candy gets in the back of the truck with Steve Martin and they're driving down. You know what scene I'm talking about? The guy's got the dog in the back. Yeah, it's exactly that's how I thought you were up in the northern aspect of our country, as in our, I guess, as our continent. Really, it wouldn't be our country. Our continent, if I'm using proper terms. Yeah. But Jimmy, well-traveled, going out to make the hopes and dreams of every regional promotion come true by announcing their fight. And you said in your... said to me you hadn't seen the fights yet when we were texting back and forth. And then you would also mention on your Twitter today that you didn't watch the fights live, which put me down an interesting path. Because you actually bought a pay-per-view after it aired, which seems counterintuitive to me.
Well, I could, the thing is that because of my YouTube and this show and all that stuff, I need to watch it today. I have to watch it this morning. And as you said, I was in Canada, I was in Nova Scotia, actually. There was a whiteout in Montreal, so the whole travel headache, by the way, which the promotion dealt with in a very professional way. A lot of places will leave you hanging. They did not. I had to spend an extra night in Montreal and got there the same day or the night before the show, very, very late, to Nova Scotia, where it was freezing cold. And anyway, so there were a lot of headaches getting there. And so getting back, I was like, look, I have to do this thing early this morning. I'm sure I could hunt around somewhere and find a free version of it, but I don't, it's got to get done. So I just ordered it and, did it on ESPN Plus and sat there and watched it. So, I'm sure I could have hunted some illegal stream at some point, but it's like, I just don't have the energy or the inclination right now. And then people always bitch about fighter pay and then they stream stuff illegally. I don't do that. So I'm like, whatever, I'll just pay for it.
You know what's so interesting? You put a perfect segue in there. We've had, for 80% of the show's life, a sponsorship with Fight TV. They just hit their 4-year anniversary. And if you were going to buy BKFC 10, you don't have to buy it because technically one of you is going to win it for free. They've done this with us before. They're going to do it again. We are going to give away a pay-per-view key for this fight card. We're going to talk a little bit about it more in the week, but it's interesting that, again, if we're talking about buying things, you actually bought a non-live event. I can't imagine the non-live pay-per-view sales are high, but we do know Jimmy Smith added his name to the tally. Did you watch the whole card, or did you just watch the fights then?
Oh, no, I never watch the whole card if I can avoid it. Whenever I see something late, you know what I mean? Like the next day, if it's a UFC fight night and we do a post-fight, you and I do one or something like that, I just watch on ESPN and I fast forward through everything but the fights. I don't sit there and watch anything. I don't even, everybody knows I mute them when I watch them. So I'm not even listening to it. I just watch.
Well, if you listen to our preview, you know that I've known a lot of the guys over at FactX for a while. I want to send a special congratulations to Yusuf Salal, who came out and put on a masterclass, a great performance, won his fight, and the man that was supposed to be in his corner, James Krause, who I've had the pleasure of having a couple dinners, group dinners with. All the fighters over there are great at Factory X. All good people, all people that put their heart and soul into this sport. Zach Cummings, Chris Camozzi, I hate to name names because now I'm going to leave a couple out. But listen, James Krause did something that is like UFC 5 worthy. He showed up to corner somebody else, ended up fighting somebody in a different weight class, and he did a really, really solid job of coming out and putting on a performance. For regional shows, we're used to that. I've seen that done far too many times. But at the professional level, I had somebody watch the fight with me, and they were trying to think of an analogy for that. And I was like, there's really no other sport. It's not the same as you went to a baseball game and they asked you to come out and throw a couple pitches, or you went to a football game and they asked you to run the ball. It would probably be the equivalent of showing up to a demolition derby, one of the guys saying, hey, somebody didn't show up, and you say, well, I drove here in my car, I think I'll get by, and taking your brand new car out into the demolition derby. You know you're going to get beat up. You know it's not going to be fun, but you're doing it because you're confident in your skills and you love the sport to a degree.
Yeah, there's nothing like that that's even possible, really, in any other sport. They just don't work that way. So, and I was surprised. A lot of times, a lot of commissions won't allow this kind of thing, you know, but we're going to talk about the weakness of the Texas Commission before the night's over. But I don't see California, Nevada, New York, New Jersey allowing that to happen. We're not going to clear somebody with 1 day unless he had a fight coming up a week later or something, and they knew about it, and so they knew he was ready. You know, it's risky. It's risky to do something like this, and a lot of commissions wouldn't.
Everything
have
is bigger in Texas, even discretion in judges, apparently. So we're going to start off with Derrick Lewis, Ilir Latifi. You know, listen, I was tough on Latifi. I didn't think that the takedowns were going to work. I didn't think he could rely on them. I didn't think they were going to be successful for him. I take it all back. They were, but the next step is capitalizing on them, and he could not seem to do that. On the other side of this, Derrick Lewis, and he seemed composed. He put together a full fight. Cardio didn't seem to be a problem like it's been in the past. I saw a couple new striking wrinkles, but I think a lot of this win just came down to the last-minute goal for broke Derrick Lewis, and I know he's a fan favorite, and I love him myself in terms of the way he carries himself. A very fun fighter to watch, very comical fighter to listen to, but recently the performances I just don't think have been there for a guy that's trying to be at the top of the division.
Well, I think he's shown us that he's just, I mean, he's not championship level. That's not an insult. I mean, who the hell is championship level? Very few people. He's become more composed. He's become more patient. He's become a little bit more cerebral. He doesn't come out and just throw big leather. And we saw that in the Ilir Latifi fight. What impressed me most is there was a time when Derrick Lewis would have gotten really frustrated by Ilir Latifi's game plan, would have thrown a lot of punches at short distance, trying to kind of take out his frustrations and burn a lot of energy. And then when they did separate, he would have thrown some wild punches to try and kind of get back in the fight. And he didn't do that. He was very, very patient and was smart at the right time. I think we've seen what Derrick Lewis can do, which is he's a great mid top 10 heavyweight and can have some exciting fights against some good guys. He can fight patiently when he needs to. He certainly has knockout power and he has skills, but you know, we've kind of seen the ceiling. I would be surprised, even in a division like the heavyweight division that is always kind of in search of the next contender, and guys get second chances all the time. I don't know if we'll see Derrick Lewis get there without another really big, shocking performance. Without that, we've kind of seen where he can go, which is he can beat good heavyweights and he can knock some guys out, but I don't see him being champion.
The aforementioned James Krause fight had some people going back and forth on social media, as did Danny Ige and Bechtik. Split decisions. You know, I mean, that means people saw it different ways. That's all there is to it. I was intrigued in this fight. I thought Ige deserved to win. I just don't understand the issue that Bechtik seems to have with his stamina here. Is this fight really almost played out in the inverse of what we thought it was going to be? And whenever that happens, I'm always like perplexed watching a fight. I don't even know if I could have scored it properly. I was just really entranced with how this did not go at all how I expected. I will say one thing though, looking back at this fight, there's a lot of room for both of these guys to improve with this performance, but I didn't personally have an issue with Danny Ige getting this win.
No, I did not. I think he deserved it. The issue to me, as you said, it worked out the exact opposite of the way we expected, in that I thought it would be kind of Bechtik keeping him in range and Ige trying to get his grappling going. I thought Ige's boxing looked exceptional. I thought he had good hooks, very tight, crisp combinations, very accurate with his hands. And Bechtik, on the other side, realized, hey, man, I might have to go to my ground game. And in round 2, he did that, and he did that successfully. Got the mount, went for the arm triangle, couldn't quite get it, but we saw his ground skills. And then in round 3, as you said, he started slowing down and running out of gas, and his grappling was less effective, and Ige landed some big punches. I thought Ige deserved the win. I thought he was the better fighter, and I thought that showed. And Mirsad Bechtik, to some degree, has to go back to the drawing board. It's a tough division, and Dan Ige that night was the better fighter, and he's on a good streak now. He's got a lot of momentum.
You had actually called this perfectly to the fact that they were going to throw the heavyweights in to kind of get some filler time in before our back-to-back championship fights. We'll have Justin Tafa getting the win over Juan Adams. You know, Juan Adams, man, I just don't get it. Like, the fight IQ, I don't get it. You know, he was almost in the beginning of this fight, like emulating John Jones by having his hands out and his fingers spread the way John does. And all he needed to do was just deal with one exchange and then use his better wrestling to get control, get down to the ground. And it seemed like from the instant Justin Tafa hit him, the instant he hit him, it hurt him. Like, sometimes you can watch a fight and just know, like, okay, that landed, that hurt him. You can tell. He never responded to that by trying to kind of turn the momentum into his favor. And I fully expected at some point he was just going to sell out, go for the takedowns. I thought he was the larger guy, but instead he just kept engaging in this firefight. And it's frustrating to watch as a fan when you want somebody to win and you know they have the tools to win, and he just did not use them. I get it. He's a professional fighter. I understand the confidence. I understand and respect his willingness to stand in there and trade, but sometimes you've got to do what's best for business. And that fight, him standing there and exchanging with Justin Tafa, was not best for business, and he paid the price and got knocked out relatively quickly.
Yeah, well, what's interesting to me about the whole thing is if you're the taller fighter, you got to use that advantage. If you're the rangier fighter, you got to use that advantage. And I didn't see that at all. And that's always frustrating to see. If you're Juan Adams, you got a shorter guy in front of you, a guy who doesn't have your reach. Your jab can go over the top. You can use it effectively. And what did he constantly do? He was pawing with the jab. Penny agrees. He was pawing with the jab all the time, not snapping it out there, not throwing it with any authority, not using straight punches, which are the best weapon you can use when you have a range advantage. And John Jones is good at that. He didn't do that at all. And so it was an incredibly frustrating fight to watch. It's like he was just waiting for Tafa, the harder puncher, to get in close and close distance. And that's exactly what he did. And so it's always kind of disheartening for me to see someone have a distinct physical or tactical advantage and not make use of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the other side of it is, this is a guy that's lost 3 in a row. This is a guy that is probably on his way out of the UFC that I thought, going back to the pre-show, kind of had a tough out against Greg Hardy. Probably didn't put the best performance in that night, but probably had a lot of people write him off because people didn't realize that Greg Hardy is as well-versed a martial artist as he is. And you see somebody with potential, you see somebody that has the skills, and then they just don't apply them the right way. It does tend to just frustrate you a little bit as a fan. I hate it for him that he lost, but as you said, there's a lot of tactical things he could have done to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, and it's disheartening, and he had an emotional statement today about his disappointment, and we saw against Greg Hardy how disappointed he was with that loss. But look, you got to fight smarter than that. 3 in a row in the heavyweight division against guys that weren't established in the UFC themselves. You got to do better than that if you're going to stick around. I'm
disappointed for him, and obviously I'm glad that he recognizes it, but a tough night and a tough couple nights, actually, in the UFC cage for him. We're moving forward, though, to the women's flyweight division, or really we just should call it Valentina's division, as she took on Caitlin Jakugian. I actually thought Caitlin's going to run this full fight, and she just got overpowered. I mean, it was takedowns at will. If it wasn't technique, it was just pure strength. It was better fight IQ. And I think this just speaks to me how good Valentina is. The ending sequence of this fight literally was like a grappling exchange that she won, and then a faux guard jump that Caitlin tried that got shrugged off. She landed, went right into crucifix, and finished her. Like, it's the craziest fight sequence end you'll see in a really long time. And Caitlin was doing everything she could to prevent every step of that from going Valentina's way. It was just one of those fights where you realize, man, there's no one in the flyweight division that can even come close. She just makes them look amateur. And Caitlin was a great fighter. She is a great fighter. She's just in the wrong division at the wrong time to be taking on Valentina Shevchenko.
it, it's Shevchenko and then everybody else. That is a 125-pound division. No one's going to touch Shevchenko for quite a while. She's heads and tails better. Amanda Nunes at 135 and 145 is heads and tails better. 115 is the only competitive women's division in all of mixed martial arts. Right now, Bellator 145, it is Cyborg and everybody else. And that's kind of the problem a lot of times with women's mixed martial arts is it's a one-woman show. Right now, 125 is a one-woman show. Shevchenko just showed that, against the best competitor they could have put out there, there wasn't a single moment in this fight where I thought, oh, she might win. Or, oh, this might not go Shevchenko's way. I didn't think that for a second. Took her a minute in the first round to find her range and figure everything out. Once she did, it was all over. She's just too good. The problem is she's already had 2 fights with Nunes. Neither were particularly exciting. That might happen again just because they're out of options. And I don't like seeing that. I don't like seeing a division where it's the champ and everybody else, but
yeah,
that's how it is
both
right
those
now.
girls have done it. And it's so interesting that you said that you didn't want to see it because you don't normally see a split and a loss get ran back that way. But I know most of the community is just clamoring for this fight. And to be fair, they're going back to that UFC 215 card and saying that that was a closer fight. I know it was a split decision. I saw it Amanda Nunes' way. I think it just comes down to perception. If you thought that wasn't Amanda's fight, then you're probably a lot more willing to bring this back. I'm just not. And I hate, like you said, I hate to have a fight come up just because it seems like there's nothing else that can be done, because guess what? After that fight's done, we've still got to go have girls fight. But yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches to a degree, but it is pretty much 2 girls that have asserted dominance to the point that there's no one left to fight in these divisions, and we just have to match them together.
Yeah, and it's disheartening because you would hope the UFC, with the depth of talent they have, could put together compelling divisions. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily their fault. It's just they have 2 champs that are heads and tails above everybody. And all the names that could give them a challenge I don't think they can give them a challenge, but would generate any interest are just gone. They're just not there anymore. And in between this wave and the next, they are just completely dominant.
All right, 1730 it is. Jon Jones, Dominic Reyes. Before I get into this analysis, I just want to say, I watched a lot of Dominic Reyes' mannerisms before the fight, and I thought to myself that he was really setting himself up to look unprepared if that pre-fight mindset had turned into a loss. But you can see now, I can understand now where his confidence came from in how he fought and why he was so relaxed. And that's really not something we've seen a lot of fighters walk in against Jon Jones and show. Basically, this is the same Jon Jones we've expected. But the way Dominic Reyes responded, he let that pressure come, but then he returned with kind of like a kickboxing style, which was very effective. Whenever Jon took him down, he got right back up. And in a world of people that say, Jon Jones has never fought someone like me, it was refreshing to actually see somebody go into the cage and respond by fighting in a way that we really haven't seen someone fight Jon Jones with that mindset of, listen, I'm not going to let you mentally beat me. I'm not going to wilt to your power, and everything you do, I'm going to respond. And I think a lot of people wrote Jon off because of this, that he didn't seem as sharp. But honestly, I think a lot of this was just Dominic Reyes was better than we expected. His confidence was out of the park coming in with all these wins. And maybe, just maybe, he hasn't been in the UFC long enough to really quantify what Jon Jones has done, and the intimidation factor isn't there the way it is for some other athletes.
I thought the thing was, his movement really seemed to confuse Jon Jones. And we'll get into the effect that had on the judging, but he angled so well that Jon Jones couldn't big brother him, right? The oblique kicks really weren't working. That lead pawing hand he usually uses to judge distance, that wasn't working. He just didn't seem to be able to find Reyes at all. Reyes' footwork was too good. And I think that was a big part of his strategy. I think that was well placed, is angle, and then come in with power, which he did very effectively. And he did slow down in rounds 4 and 5 just because so much movement. He just couldn't keep that pace going. And as he started to slow down, he was an easier target for John Jones. But his movement was just off the charts. And I really appreciate that. Very, very tricky. And John Jones, in my opinion, in the first 3 rounds, didn't have an answer for that. And that's what led to, in my opinion, Dominic Reyes' success. I thought he won the fight. I thought he took the first 3 rounds.
I would agree. It's definitely not what we're used to seeing. I mean, basically, John Jones, just kind of, you call it big brothering. To me, he just kind of clowns guys. He stuffs their takedowns. He walks through their power shots. He strikes them into oblivion. He head kicked DC into another dimension. I did see a close fight, but I also did see a John Jones that was pressured, but I didn't see Dominic Reyes really swarm, I believe, in the first round and the 4th round when he kind of had John hurt. And that's one of the things that kind of pulled me a little bit more John Jones's way, that, maybe there just wasn't those opportunities that Dominic was 100% ready to commit to that could have turned this fight. I saw distinctly the first round going to Dom. I saw the second round going to Dom. I saw the third round kind of iffy. Maybe you could go Reyes' way, but I thought the 4th round, the championship rounds, I mean, they call them that for a reason, right? The 4th round, I saw John's way, and then the 5th round, I just thought John put it together when he needed to win the fight. I would not have had any negative thoughts. I wouldn't have had any apprehensions if it had went the other way. If it could have been a split draw for all I cared, right? I would have been happy. I think we saw a quality fight. I think we saw a fight we haven't seen in a long time. And I guess that leads us to the next question. This has to get ran back or no?
I would like to see it get run back. I think it's kind of going that way. Everybody seems amenable to that, but it's the fans that really have the say. If the fans will pay for it, they'll run it back. And I think with the controversy about the judging, I think that's the best way to go right now. Is there another super clear contender coming up at 205 that no one can wait to see take on John Jones? No. Are there more compelling fights for John Jones in other divisions? Yes. Would you choose a rematch over him moving up to heavyweight to take on Miocic? Right now, I would. Would I take it over Israel Adesanya? Well, Adesanya has a tough one against Yoel Romero. So, and also the DC rematch is looming for Miocic if he chooses to take it. So right now would be the time. In that if Miocic beats DC, let's say in a rubber match, then he could call his shot, maybe calls out John Jones, and that's a big fight. Israel Adesanya blows away Yoel Romero, and then he calls out John Jones. Maybe that's the fight to make. That hasn't happened yet. That could take a while. Right now, with what's in front of them and the controversy generated by this decision, I think Reyes running it back, which, once again, incredibly rare. You get an immediate rematch in the UFC. I think it might be appropriate.
I would agree. But in the effort of fairness, how can we have a unanimous decision be ran back before the split decision like we saw with Thiago?
A split decision in the eyes of whom?
The judges. That was a split decision.
Right. But the fans, no. I think that's the issue. Is I see much more outrage right now online, and not just about fans, but Ariel Helwani thought it should be run back. Dana White talked about the judging being inferior. Joe Rogan's going on and on about it. It's one of those things where the fans seem more outraged about this one than Thiago Santos by a mile and a half. By a mile. You could argue that Santos' fight was closer, but the fans are more adamant about Dominic Reyes getting screwed. A lot of people feel that way. Now, I wouldn't use the term robbery for this or anything like that. I just thought Dominic Reyes did win the first 3 rounds. But the fans themselves seem more upset about this than the Thiago Santos fight. And that's what motivates everybody. And remember, Thiago Santos had surgery on both knees? A rematch just wasn't going to happen anyway. Even if the fans had been, marching in the streets about it. He's got to recover. I don't know if he's recovered yet. This could go back. This could get run back in 4 months, 5 months. I just think it's the kind of that perfect storm to make an immediate rematch, which, once again, very rare in the UFC.
We're almost also seeing the inverse of what we just talked about with Valentina and Amanda, where now we're kind of having this guy that had that dominance, that had that unbeatable, almost, invincibility around him. where, the last couple fights, we've started to see some, I don't want to say weakness, but we've started to see somebody that's becoming more beatable.
Simple question. Are you ready? All right. Were you in awe of Jon Jones in his last 3 fights? No. I mean, that's really it. Not that he looked bad or he didn't win or that. What I'm saying is probably all the fights in his career before that, even in the very close fight to Gustafsson, I was in awe of what I was seeing. Right? You could argue Gustafsson beat him in the first fight, but you still saw things that you went, whoa, man, I've never seen a light heavyweight do that before. In his last 3 fights, starting with the Anthony Smith fight, which I believe he won, but he didn't look, extraordinary in that fight. Thiago Santos, then we have Reyes. In his last 3 fights, he hasn't looked awe-inspiring. We haven't seen that Jon Jones with spinning elbow, knock your head off, these combinations from nowhere, the guy who knocked out DC with a head kick. We haven't seen that guy in his last 3 fights. No one's there forever. You remember Michael Jordan playing for the Wizards, right?
Well, he was right down the road.
You know what I mean?
He was right down the road. I remember.
Right. He was good. He still looked good. He wasn't Michael Jordan anymore. Right. So we're getting that point with Jon Jones. Well, I think we're there. We're just the years and the camps and they've just caught up with him. And the game has caught up with him to some degree. He's just not doing the amazing things he used to do. Can he still win? Yes. Is he still champion? Yes. But, we're not seeing that awe-inspiring Jon Jones.
Since you kind of threw me a spur-of-the-moment question, I'm going to do the same to you. Five fights ago, Jon Jones, if I told you he was going to fight Corey Anderson, what would your response have been?
Yeah, that would have been
now.
So.
If I tell you, hey, Jon Jones' next opponent's going to be Corey Anderson, Jimmy, what do you think now?
Certainly possible. I think there are two. The problem is Corey Anderson as a selling point, as a boy watch Jon Jones take on Corey Anderson. I think there's more juice behind Reyes, Adesanya, and Miocic. Now, I'm not saying any of those will happen. Who knows? My point is, I think there's more fan appeal, and Corey Anderson is dangerous. I think the UFC and Jon Jones understand that. Look, if I'm going to lose, might as well have it be a big fight and a big name. A fan-friendly fight's going to make me a lot of money. Those 3, I think, make more money than Anderson.
You complete typing that comment that I'm an idiot for even bringing up Corey Anderson. The reason I bring that up is just a few months ago, how soon we forget.
I don't think you are at all, by the way. I don't think you are at all. I'm not saying
Johnny Walker was the man, right? Johnny Walker was the guy that had all the tools that could actually take Jon Jones out. And we saw what Corey Anderson did to him. I mean, really just imposed his will, kind of Jon Jones'd him, like, in a way. And I just thought to myself, man, when I think of that matchup now, when I think about who's next, the next fighter, I don't think has the tallest task. I think we're seeing a smarter Jon Jones in terms of how he fights, but a much more guarded Jon Jones, a much less wild Jon Jones. And with that, we're losing some of that, I don't know, some of that big sell. But I often wonder, if I was Jon Jones right now, which I'm not, and certainly I don't know that I would trade places with him given all his transgressions, I would probably say, listen, give me one more easy out, let me take these gloves off, and I'm going to get out while I can still get out on top, because the more fights he has this year, I think the closer and closer we get to seeing a loss. That's going to mean a lot more. I think the next loss is going to mean a lot more than all the wins. I think this is going to be the one. He loses his belt, I think you're going to see the public turn that, but now he's not the greatest. He was the greatest for a long time, but now he's got this one loss. They've looked past the Hamill loss. They've looked past, just because of time, they look past some of the things with DC and the drugs. At least most fans have. There's always the 20% that just cling to it with everything they have. But I feel like the next loss is going to be the one where everybody says, yeah, well, I told you so. And that's going to be hard to come back from.
I certainly agree with you, but big, huge but. I don't know if this at this stage in his career, John Jones's career, if there are any easy outs, right? I mean, even, what's the easiest out? Corey Anderson, and the dude's no walk in the park. You know what I mean? So if you have to think about, look, my next fight might be my swan song regardless, don't you shoot for the moon and go, all right, Miocic, okay, Israel Adesanya, and, big fight in Australia or something like that, rather than, when it's really time catching up with you, which is, I personally think what we're seeing. I don't think, Dominic Reyes did come in with a lot of confidence and a great game plan, all these things. I don't want to diminish him at all. But if it's just time catching up with you and it's inevitable anyway, does the opponent make as much of a difference? Why not, once again, take on the big name for big money? That would be my caveat to that. That'd be my counter to that.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to him. I mean, does he want to continue to wipe out this division the way he has? I mean, at this point, there's only a couple names, big names left in the division that he hasn't faced. And, don't get me wrong, those names change every 6 months. But at the same time, we're slowly starting to see the division creep up on him. But at the end of the day, he still has enough to get his hand raised from what we've seen, no matter who they put in against him.
But, I mean, he knows, his team knows a lot more than we do about how he feels and how he's reacting and what's going on. And for those of us who remember the dominance of Roy Jones, when it went, it went. And if you look at the first Antonio Tarver fight, it wasn't there. John Jones wasn't John Jones anymore. I'm sorry, not John Jones. Roy Jones Jr. wasn't Roy Jones Jr. anymore. He just wasn't. So in the rematch, it really came out, and he got knocked out, and he was never the same guy. If you know that moment's coming, do you get out now? Do you take the last one big payday? Hey, screw it. I'm probably going to lose to Stipe or Israel Adesanya or whatever, but might as well go out with a big fight. Those are decisions you start making, but only John Jones knows where he is in his own mind. He knows, maybe his team knows. That's about it. And he's got to make that decision because no one's on top forever.
Ultimately, I think it comes down to, are you ready to let someone else make their name off yours? It's
right. Yeah. Do you pass the torch or do you go, screw it?
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
We see it in wrestling all the time. It's scripted and it's still hard to have happen, right? Like Hulk Hogan never wanted to be the guy that dropped it. Right now, John Jones knows he is going to either retire or be the guy that drops it. You just have to be willing to say, hey, I'm ready to make this guy. Oh, that's the guy that beat John Jones. That's the guy that did it. In a lot of ways. And it doesn't matter what they do since then. I know you're a big, you're a big Holly Holm is MMA's Buster Douglas, but guess what? Holly Holm is always going to be that girl that took out Ronda Rousey. That's all there is to it. No matter what she did, no matter what the next guy does, the next person that beats John Jones is going to be the guy. From a fan standpoint, I kind of want it to be DC just to bring that full circle. I'd love to see it be Stipe, but
never. John, look, the one thing I don't mean to cut you off. The one thing I would say if I were John Jones, I'm not passing the torch to DC. The rivalry is just too strong. It got too personal. It's been going on too long. If there's one person he won't fight from this point on because, he's not the fighter he once was, I would say it's DC. The one guy he's like, look, I would never pass the torch to that guy. It would be DC. This performance against Dominic Reyes, I think buried any hope for a DC trilogy because John Jones is not going to let DC walk away having beaten John Jones. I really honestly
okay, so let me set the stage. DC saw that fight. He starts using a treadmill and a sauna. And he says, you know what, I'm gonna go back down.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna make so much noise. I'm gonna say so much about John Jones that he's gonna have to respond. And I'm gonna essentially keep pushing the ball in his court until he serves it back to me. You don't think that DC is the one guy that could literally sit there and talk so much, put those losses aside, put him crying memes aside. You don't think that DC is the one person that could talk so much that John Jones has no other response of, yeah, I'll beat you up a third time if you're ready to come get it?
God, maybe, but I just, if he doesn't want to go out to one person, it's DC. I think he would resist that tooth and nail. He'd fight everybody in the world other than DC. I really honestly believe that. Now, maybe you're right. Maybe he makes so much noise that you just can't, or there's just so much money on the table. It's just, but John Jones is a prideful guy, and that's been his nemesis. And to fight him when you know you don't have the juice anymore to really get after it like you used to. And once again, only John Jones and his team know that. It's to your analogy. I mean, who could Hulk Hogan not stand more than anybody? I mean, is there anybody that he would have gone like, no, there's no, as much as I don't want to pass the torch, I'm really not passing to this guy. And I know a lot of people didn't like Hulk Hogan, and I don't really know much about the pro wrestling game in that regard, but I'm sure there's just, I remember I saw a thing recently that he refused to lose to Roddy Piper. He lost in like a non-title fight, would never lose to him in a title fight. It's that kind of thing of this is a guy with a big ego. DC's his nemesis, and I already beat you twice. I don't think he does it. Now, he could make so much noise that it's impossible, but I doubt it. I really doubt it. I think
have
he'd
this
retire
weird
first.
feeling that Hulk Hogan would not drop it to the honky tonk man, only because who wants to lose to an Elvis impersonator?
Yeah, man. Honky tonk was one of those weirdest phenomenal. I remember. This is how old I am. I remember him beating Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and thinking, what the hell is going on? Because Ricky Steamboat was just huge at the time. He had beaten, now that I'm older and I know the backstory and everything, where he wanted time off, and basically WWF went, if you want time off, you're losing the title, and you're losing to who we say you lose it to, and all this stuff. And they made him lose to Honky Tonk Man, who just happened to be the guy around at the time. But I couldn't believe that at the time. I really, what is this? Once again, this Elvis impersonator beating Ricky the Dragon Steamboat had the greatest match of all time at WrestleMania 3 with Randy Savage.
Not only that,
crazy.
Ricky Steamboat's wars against Ric Flair, I mean, really put him in.
Oh, some of the greatest.
Put him in the iconic air. And then, like you said, you lose to the guy that can't play the guitar that carries it. With that said, we have really went a whole bunch of different directions on this one. We appreciate you guys checking this out, and we will be back very shortly with more content.